Right, we're going to do standard deviation. As part of what we're going to do, we're going to standardize some information. And we're going to then get, what's it called? Correlation coefficient. Okay. So the very first thing we need to do is find the mean, right? So in order to find the mean, if we look to the left of this page, we have an Excel sheet. And they've given us calories and time. Okay. In order to find mean, the fastest way to do it is to put a function into this Excel sheet. So we put equals. That way it knows we're doing some sort of math equation. And yeah, sum bracket. And what we do is we're just going to click from the first one down to the last one we want it to sum. So we want this information to all be summed here. So we can push equals. And that sums all the values. So sum, in our case, we did, from the first one. So sum bracket A2. And the last one we did was A21. That's what we typed in there. Okay? So that gives us that information. The other thing we need to do is remember to find the mean. We have to divide our two values. So count. So first what we just did, sorry, let me highlight that. We just did the sum of all the values, and that's what we did here. That's our value, okay? Now we got to find out the number of terms. So how many numbers do we actually count? Well, we can get Excel to do that also. We could put a count function, it's called. So we put equals COUNT bracket, and we get it to count the number of terms we use. We don't want to include our this sum. One down here, our sum, yeah. So n brackets, 20 terms. So it just told us there are 20 terms. And what we did again was we did count A2 to A21. Okay? But we still have to divide those two values, right, to find out our true mean. So we're going to take those two values. And if you notice in this case, this will give us, I'm going to write mean above it just so we know, okay? The mean below. So mean is equal to, well, I just go up to the value, that's in cell A22, divided by cell A23, the one below it, equals, and there's our sum, right? So what we did here was A22 divided by A23, and it gave us our mean, which was 455.5. That's what you found when you did it? You rounded it. Okay. So I'm going to do that a little quicker this time. Okay? And there is a much faster way I could have done this. I can put this all into one function. Okay? So the second time I could do this, I could say equals and then bracket, because I wanted to do the summing of all values first, then count all values. So I put a bracket in there. Can you do it that way? Actually, no. Let's just do it the old way. Sum, I'm not 100% sure I can do it that way. I'll check that after. So sum of all values. And then we could say divided by, I think we can go count all values. Let's see if this will work. No, I need this to be in brackets, count. So see, I've put it all into one. Did you get 34 when you did it? Yours was a little different. That's okay.
I may have changed the number.
That's all right. So if you notice, I put the sum divided by the count function. So I could do it all in one. So these are our two means. That's great. We've got both means. Let's capitalize that down. Okay, so we have both means. Now, in order to do standard deviation, if you recall, we take each value and we subtract it by the mean. And that's going to tell us essentially how far each of them are from our mean. Then when we do that, our next row would be to actually square all these values. Okay? Then we square it, and then we're going to have to sum them all. So I'm going to move over some of the information here just so you can see. So I'm just going to move it over a little. So what I mean by this is going to be called our x minus, I'm just going to call it large X because I can't really do an X bar on here, or at least I'm not quite sure how. So that's my title. And the way I'm going to do this is equals A2, okay, minus, now I always want to use this function here, A26. I want them to always subtract from the mean. So I actually have to put a dollar sign. Dollar sign here and a dollar sign here. So it always knows to take from that exact spot, A26. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this function. So So that was 16.5, and I put Control C, and I paste it into all of these, and there we go. It always, and if you look, see how it said A19 in this case? Well, that's our A19, and A26. It always subtracted from that mean. So those dollar signs allows me to always go back to that. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing here. We know we need our x minus large x bar. Okay, and what I'm going to do is equals this guy here, subtract dollar sign, and this guy's value is f dollar sign 26. Okay, that's that mean down there. And see how I highlighted the cell in green? Yeah. So I know to do that, Control C, and all I got to do is paste it into the rest of these. So I paste it, boom, there we go. It's done all those means really fast, which it took me a very long time to do myself. All that information. So now I have my x minus x bar. Okay. The next thing, like we said, is we have to square all these values. Okay. Well, to square all these values, I'm going to go bracket x minus large x. And then a power or an exponent on a calculator is that little hat looking button. So the power of 2. That's what I'm putting into it. Okay. It's got a hat looking button, and it's maybe the same on your calculator.
Oh, so you have this square?
Yeah. You have to push this hat button. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say equals, because we have an equation again, that to the power of 2. And you see, it squared that value for me. I put the cell in, and I put the hat, that little house roof looking thing, to 2. So what it's doing is it's squaring all those values, which is great. Because now what I'm going to do is copy that and paste it. And it just squared all the values for me. Again, which would have been a very long process.
Oh.
We do the same thing over here. X. You don't have to put a title. I'm just letting you know what they are, so you can kind of have an idea of what I did below. I put equals, the cell to the left. And the reason I copy and paste is it copies the same pattern. It always takes the cell to the left and then applies that mathematical thing. So to the power of 2. So what it's going to do when I copy it, as you see, I'm going to just paste it into that one there and then look in the cell. See how it changed from G2 to G3?
Oh.
It always copies that pattern.
Oh, okay.
So now that I've copied it, I paste it, and it squared everything. Okay? Well, then we know, after we've done this, we take all of these values, and we have to sum them, and that is called our variance. A and C? I think that's how you spell it. When we sum all of those values, that's our variance with standard deviation.
Okay.
Do you recall this at all?
Yeah, way back.
Well, to sum them is easy. Do you remember what we do?
You just highlight them and sum.
Yep. Sum, bracket, all of those values. And it summed them all for us. So we'll do that under both of them. Sum, bracket, drag it down. So I've now summed all those values. But in order to get a standard deviation from the variance, what do we need to do to that variance? The standard.
You have to then divide it by all of them? Minus 1?
That's right. We got to divide them all of them. And then what do we have to do to it? So we take our variance. Let's call it, what usually they represent it as is they usually say the variance is the sum of x minus x bar squared. And we divide by n, the number of terms. I think that's right? Yeah, I think that's what we do. So we got to divide by the number of terms. So we already know we can sum it. We're going to say now divided by count, bracket, and they're going to count how many terms there are. We already know there's 20, so I could just type the number 20 in, but depending how this changes. So now it's divided that number. So it's sum them. And again, remember, we want to divide by the number of terms, so divide by count. Count counts how many terms there are for us.
Okay.
Okay? Oh, it shouldn't be a plus sign. Count H. Okay. So now it's divided by that. And now, technically, I need to find the square root of this to get the standard deviation. So I got to square root this term here. So I'm going to say is equal to the guy above, but I have to square root it. Now, the calculator doesn't easily square root. So another value for square root is to the power of a half. Is equivalent of square rooting something.
Oh.
Okay, so just as a side note. So I take this guy and I put him to the power, and I got to do it in brackets, of 1 over 2, or 0.5. Putting something to the power of 0.5 will square root it.
Okay.
And that's our square root. So this is equal to that value above to the power of, and in this one I'm going to put 0.5 so you can see the same. Okay, same idea. This one went to the power of 0.5, and that square rooted it. So these are our standard deviations. Now because I talked through it, it took a little while to do, but in an Excel sheet, that would have took us a very long time to do, to run all those numbers by hand. Okay, and if I had memorized the process, I could have run this very quickly. So our standard deviation, which we just found, are 29.5 and 6.1, which will help us with our coefficient after. All right.